And the first point I want to get over to you is that the world is not like that at all, or let us be more polite, the world in which I live is not like that at all.
Bienvenue sur Radio REcyclerie, le podcast des idées, des débats et des écologies, à écouter en accès libre sur larecyclerie.com. Qu'est-ce que la démocratie terrestre et comment la faire vivre dans un quotidien politique ? Place à une conférence puissante de Vandana Shiva, incontournable figure écologiste et féministe.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci d'être si nombreuses et si nombreux. On redémarre, comme tu dis, Marin. Voilà, donc je suis Thomas Boulle, le fondateur de la maison d'édition Rue de l'Échiquier, qui a l'honneur de publier donc, l'autobiographie de Vandana Shiva avec Wildproject. Je tenais juste, moi aussi, à remercier Simon et la REcyclerie de nous accueillir dans cet endroit qu'on connaît bien. Je voulais aussi rendre hommage et remercier vivement Léa Thévenot, qui est notre responsable de la communication, et qui a organisé avec brio ces 4 jours de Vandana Shiva en France, puisque Vandana est arrivé à Paris mercredi, est intervenu à Verdragon, à Bagnolet, en présence de Lorraine Bastide, est partie dès le lendemain pour Marseille, où elle est intervenue dans le cadre d'Opéra Mundi, est ensuite allée avec Marin à Lyon, où elle est intervenue hier au Grand Palais de la Mutualité. Elle finit donc ce cycle fatigant ce soir avec nous. Thank you so much, Vandana, for being here with us. Donc, effectivement, on est parti pour 1 heure, 1 heure et quart d'intervention de Vandana en anglais, mais vous avez votre voisin bienveillant à côté qui vous traduira si vous ne connaissez pas, si vous ne comprenez pas tout ce que nous dit Vandana. But you're going to speak slowly. Et on terminera en fait par des questions de la salle, un quart d'heure, 20 minutes, pour conclure ce moment tous ensemble. Je vais te laisser présenter, Vandana.
Oh non, vas-y, je t'en prie, tu fais ça super bien. Moi, je parle après encore. Vas-y, tu veux bien ? Vas-y.
Vandana Shiva, dont on fête cette année le 70e anniversaire, est une figure majeure de l'écologie et du féminisme. Ces combats l'ont mené depuis les montagnes de l'Himalaya jusqu'au Brésil et un peu partout dans le monde depuis 50 ans. C'est d'abord une combattante et je pense que c'est vraiment à ce titre qu'on est fiers de pouvoir la publier aujourd'hui. We have a first question for you because here we are at les assises de la démocratie terrestre. So what would be your definition of Earth democracy?
You know, I don't try and reduce very complex ideas and evolving ideas to a definition. I articulate them as my understanding grows. So I was saying, you know, a democracy for me is an evolving, living concept, directive, many principles, and it's a co-evolution of both my own evolution, but the unfolding of events around us. You know, I grew up in a civilization where we've never seen humans as separate from nature. We've never seen humans as superior to nature. And we've always seen ourselves as part of one earth family. We have a word for it. It is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasundhara is one of the thousands of names of the earth. One thing we managed to do in India is never reduce anything to one name or one definition. So the Ganges has 1,000 names, the living earth has 1,000 names, and one of her names is Vasundhara. And Kutumbakam is the family of the earth. And in the family of the earth are the trees and the forests and the rivers and the soil, people of all diversity. And when it's articulated in one of our ancient texts, it says very clearly, those who think that some people and some beings are separate, and who think that some people and some beings are inferior, this is a reflection of a petty mind. Petty mind. The evolved mind recognizes that the whole world is one family, and we are all interconnected. Then you have people like Chief Seattle. When the colonizers wanted to take the land, and he said, how can you even think of wanting to buy our land? This is our mother. We cannot sell our mother. And this is at the time of the colonialism of America, but even today in India, every land grab has been stopped when people have said, this is our mother and we will never leave her. That's how the tribals have defended their forests and their land from mining. But again, you know, I know Europeans have a habit to say, oh, you all have a rich tradition, but we don't. But think of the fact, you had a Saint Francis, you know, who defined the world as one family, as brothers and sisters. And we have a Pope right now who tries to articulate that. And I know this because I've been invited to the drafting of his first encyclical and the new release of the new one. So every tradition, including indigenous cultures, see the earth as living. We as children of the earth, like her other children, with no superiority. We can't afford to be blinded by anthropocentrism. So I can definitely tell you what Earth democracy is not. It is not anthropocentrism that humans are superior to other species. It is not racism that some people, because of the lack of pigment in their skin, is superior to those who have pigmented skin, like me. It is not an apartheid of separating on the basis of religion, race, color, gender, and then using that false superiority to actually annihilate the other. You know, what was colonialism? Colonialism declared, you, the primitive people, we will civilize you. And a large part of us civilizing you will be your extermination. 90% indigenous people in the Americas wiped out. And I admire the fact that even today, they're keeping alive their earth democracy with more and more assault. Earth democracy is really the recognition we are of the earth. And the earth has her rights, the discussion earlier. And the rights are not given by us. You know, I work a lot with the rights of nature movement. I'm part of the, the writing of that declaration from Bolivia, the Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth. And the recent trends that say, you know, I've just been asked to advise some universities who are starting a program on this. Say, will you help us give rights to Mother Earth? So I haven't had time to reply to them. I've been busy with them. But when I go back home, I will reply. I said, you don't give rights to the earth. You recognize her rights. And you do recognize with that those who claim rights in place of the earth, in place of indigenous people, in place of humanity, that is what has to be corrected. We don't have to give rights to the earth. We have to take away the illegitimate rights of those who are destroying the earth and taking away the rights of people.
Thank you. You said in your memoirs, we practice earth democracy in our everyday life. So my question is, could you give us some concrete examples of Earth democracy as you live it or as it is lived in India or anywhere else?
Including here. Aren't you all breathing? You're breathing, right? Where does your breath come from? Your breath comes from the green leaves of plants that through photosynthesis take the carbon dioxide and make it your food and the oxygen that you breathe. So that is a democracy, knowing that the tree is in you every time you breathe. Yeah? I'm drinking water. We drink water 5-6 times a day. I probably drink it 20 times a day. Each time I'm drinking water, I'm living Earth's democracy. And every time I'm drinking water, I'm thinking of those whose right to water has been denied and join in their struggles. I'm practicing Earth democracy. Because from the rights of nature and the rights of the earth flow the rights of every element of her living systems. Her water, her soil, her biodiversity, her atmosphere. And from those flows of the earth flow the human rights to all of those gifts. That, to me, is the issue of subsistence that was discussed in the earlier session. To have the right to live with the rest of life without destroying it. And of course, when we eat food, if we practice our democracy, we eat thoughtfully, we make an effort to grow more food, our own food. And if we are willing to be slaves in a food dictatorship, we eat junk, we get sick, more we get sick. By thinking we're eating cheap food, we give more money to the same giants who take our tax money to make costly food look cheap. That's when we are practicing our democracy. So daily life is about breathing, eating. Daily life is about community, knowing that we are related. You know, that there was a liberal project that tried to reduce us to separated atoms and reduced nature to separated immutable particles. That's the mechanistic idea. Everything's an immutable particle and everything is separate. But that was then also projected onto society. And you'll remember, Margaret Thatcher, when neoliberalism was being imposed, it wasn't growing because there's nothing natural about it. It didn't evolve. And when people were talking about the rights of society, the rights of community, you remember what she said? There's nothing like a society. They're only individuals. And every time we remember we are not individuals separated from others. We depend on others. This is what was talked about earlier. We are interlinked in amazing linkages of mutuality, of giving. Yesterday night, I was in Lyon, and our talk was in this, what is it called? The House of
Mutuality, Palais de la Mutualité.
Mutuality. You know, you all have such an amazing tradition where you have constantly resisted the dominant categories for humanity, at least. It just needs a little expansion to include the rest of life.
Thanks.
Well, in your book, you look back on 50 years of struggle for ecology and women, and especially on your discovery of the Chipko movement. Could you tell us the story of this movement? Chipko, ça veut dire étreindre, ça veut dire to hug.
The story of the movement, and also if you consider that it was successful.
I think success, success in the market is how much money you make. success in a dominating system is how much power do you get. Success in a living system is things grow and spread. And even today, in the city of Bombay, people want to protect trees. In the western forests of California, people want to protect the old growth forests. They do chipkos. They use that word. Chipko, as I said, means to embrace. But it's embracing in the context of destruction. It's putting your oneness with the forest, the tree, the river, the mountain, for me, the seed, and embracing it with all your love and all your devotion and all your gratitude. And putting yourself between that which sustains you and that which you love and the forces of destruction is, for me, the highest form of resistance. My sisters of Chipko said, we're going to hug the trees. Stop the deforestation because leading to floods, landslides, our villages are being washed away. And we will hug the trees. You will have to kill us before you kill the trees. And those days there was nothing like earth-moving machines and all. There were no JCBs. All there was axes in the 70s. And the women were putting themselves and said, you'll have to kill us before you kill the trees. What did I learn from Chipko? I learned humility. All of us seek what we want to learn. I wanted to learn physics. And then we go into higher studies, and I worked in the nuclear reactor. I went off to Canada, and you're always, it's because the scientific institution is more a sociological phenomena than an epistemological phenomena. You're groomed to think you somehow have superior knowledge. And you're groomed to think those who didn't want to go to university don't have knowledge. Those who work in the fields, the farmers, don't have knowledge. And Chipko straightened me out. I've grown up in the forest, but I didn't know each individual species. And the women did. I knew the interconnectedness and non-locality of quanta. But the women knew the connection between the forest and the stream, and the river, the forest and the water. The other thing I learned from Chipko was, and it has guided my activism all these 50 years, that when you want to protect something, you don't first think of who else will give you support. You don't look for external support. The women organized themselves and supported themselves. They were growing food. They shared the food. No one came and gave them training of how to organize. We all have that capacity. And I love the fact that here you have the word called auto-organization. Yeah, they were auto-organized. And that's how nature works. Nature is self-organized. And I had never actually depended also on thinking about, you need money to live, because I'd grown up in the forest. But I watched after that how so many people want to act, but then they keep thinking, but who will help me? No one has to help you to live and make the right choices about living. And you have to expand your own potential and capacity and know you have the power to make the change. As Gandhi said, you have to be the change you want to see. And Chipko taught me that the women in the remotest Himalayan villages had the power to change. And they changed eventually 10 years. And the other thing I learned from Chipko is, don't think life is like Nescafe coffee. Nescafe coffee is instant coffee. You want instant results. And very often the issue of success is, did you this year shut the dam or the nuclear power plant? No. you persist. You continue. Because in life, there is no full stop and no comma. Life has to continue living. And that's the politics in a democracy is continuity.
Thanks. You mentioned the West Coast forests of the US, and similar struggles are multiplying nowadays in France and in Europe. So I'm thinking, for example, to the struggles against the mega basin in Sainte-Soline, for example, or all the struggles against highways. We have this movement we talked about, the Earth Uprising, les soulèvements de la Terre. What could you say about that? How do you see that from your perspective?
You know, ever since I started to also be an ecological activist from the days of Chipko, but I simultaneously, you know, I wasn't doing my research on quantum theory, but I was still doing research. I was doing research on ecosystems. I was doing research on forestry, later on biodiversity, on impact of genetic engineering. And because in our part of the world, like in your part of the world, every ecological movement grows as a response to destruction being done to the earth and communities in the name of development and growth. Both actually are the same thing. They're extracting from nature to bring resources to the market, turn them into commodities, make profits. That's all it's about. Even the project, and let me give you a little background on this. There was an amazing person called Ivan Illich. I don't know how many of you know him or heard of him. But he asked some of us to put together a development dictionary. Because there were some words that were dominating the development discourse. And being in India, you know, we've never used the term. It doesn't exist in our normal vocabulary. So this thing called development came from outside. And we then realized it came from the World Bank and the IMF. And then I was invited, actually, on the 50th anniversary of the creation of the World Bank, IMF, and GATT, were called the Bretton Woods institutions, a little place called Bretton Woods. And when I went there, in this hotel, there was a shop in the basement selling gifts, and among the gifts was the first day cover of that time. And the meeting was Money Men of the World Meet. Those who were making money through colonialism knew that there were independence movements, and they wanted to find new ways to continue to make money. So they created the World Bank, give a loan for something you don't need, get them into debt, then change the economy even more with the World Bank and IMF and the structural adjustment, and just totally trap people in a new slavery. So that was development. And everywhere, people were responding to their development projects, superhighways, big dams, the Green Revolution, the industrial agriculture in India. With all of these years, one of the things that I have learned, and everyone working on ecology has learned, is we will not be able to have a future without reducing our ecological footprint. But every step of development is enlarging the ecological footprint because of three reasons. First, the resources that are used are made invisible. In agriculture, I know the water is made invisible, the biodiversity is made invisible, the loss of farmers' incomes, everything is made invisible. The earth and people are made invisible. Even the fossil fuel is made invisible. Chemicals are made invisible. And those costs are never counted. As a result of which, we have a crazy industrial agriculture system that requires more and more water all the time. Because on the one hand, it's very thirsty. Chemical farming needs more water, 10 times more water, to produce the same amount of food. And that's why you need to make these reservoirs. But industrial chemical farming puts nothing back into the soil. But the soil is the biggest reservoir. I was commenting while traveling with I can see that the soils are dying. As the farms become bigger and the machinery becomes bigger. I just read today, there's new tractors in America that can no, I don't call it plowing, because not plowing, it's just rushing through the land. 400 hectares in 24 hours. And by getting rid of small farmers, you substitute people with machines and glyphosate, Roundup, which has been approved by the European Union. As a result of not giving anything back to the soil. You know, another element of Earth democracy is to remember we are the soil, we are the water. And the word humus, which is the Latin word for soil, is the root of the word human. Adam, who's supposed to be the first man, is derived from Adamus, which is the Hebrew word for soil. So we are soil. We come from the soil ecologically, symbolically, in our minds. And when we don't give back to the soil, and the soil is desertified, that then creates more and more demand for taking other people's water. You know, this is the crisis of Lake Chad. Lake Chad is dying. But every lake is dying. Every aquifer dying. Every river is dying. Because the system that pretends to be efficient is stealing other people's water. And I tell the story of Coca-Cola in the book. Because Coca-Cola, you know, every time you look at a bottle of Coca-Cola, just tell yourself stolen water. Because everywhere water is a commons and they're stealing it without permission and giving nothing back. And in terms of the highways, it's a big issue for India. I think India's new debt, earlier the debt was for industrial agriculture and green revolution, but the new debt is for highways, like yours. But they're highways to nowhere. Earlier, roads were built to connect people. Today, highways are built for container trucks of the corporations to move goods around, and they're built for people to escape. In India, I come from the mountains, and people like to come to the mountains for their vacations. But now people in Delhi were so busy chasing money, need weekends to get away. So they are destroying our valleys and the mountains, but they need more highways. The highways are all being built for those who want to escape, just like the space. You know, SpaceX and other things are being built for those who want to escape from this earth rather than taking care of this living earth. And the reason, I have a book called Soil Not Oil, in which I have a whole chapter on highways. Just like the chemicals of agriculture have their origin in Hitler's Germany, highways have an original in Hitler's Germany. The brilliant ecologist called Wolfgang Sachs, who wrote a book called For the Love of the Automobile. And Hitler built these superhighways, and he said, roads connect village to village to village. I will make superhighways to bypass the village and demonstrate our power. So both your water project and your highway project have no reason to exist in the year 2023. And I fully support your struggles of resistance.
Thank you.
You explained that the ecological crisis is linked to the destruction of the feminine principle, Shakti, the power to act. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah. Creativity is the constant power to act in a creative universe. So the word Shakti means the power to act, and it's in every part of the universe, every part of the earth. And in our cosmology, it's represented in feminine form. But even the word for nature in our language is Prakriti. Yeah? Prakriti, pra is the first, kriti is the action. The one who's the first creator, nature. So I think we need to now take the next step. We've started to recognize that nature is living. There's a new discussion about the rights of nature. But the rights of nature and nature as living, and women as a creative force, because we were defined as passive. Simone de Beauvoir was very influenced by her book. As a young schoolgirl, I read The Second Sex. All of us did around the world. But we are not the second sex. When it comes to creativity, we are the first. For the simple reason we keep doing the things that need to be done even when they are not being recognized. I call that the economy of care. So this constant ecological creativity of working with living principles and living processes. I've just done 2 books in Italy, and I was asked, because it was written during COVID, and I was asked to work on the economy of care. So I wrote a book on the economy of greed to the economy of care, and then I looked at all the words that dominate, and they did another book on the words that changed the world. Among the 2 words that have totally changed meaning, the word currency, till colonialism, used to mean that which flows and connects us. That was currency. Then Mr. Locke redefined it as money, and now we think of currency, we think of money. And now they're busy trying to make the cash go away and make digital currencies. But the real currencies of life have been made to disappear, and we have to reclaim them. And the rights of nature is really maintaining the flows of nature. The climate crisis and the solution to the climate crisis is the flows of carbon. Every flood you're having anywhere is blocking the flow of water. Yeah? Hoarding it, your project of Celine, you're hoarding water to then monopolize it. And maintaining the flow of life's flows is life and creativity. The cholesterol in our arteries, what does it do? It blocks our blood flow, right? And that's the problem with heart problems. But just like our arteries, they need to keep flowing, our rivers need to keep flowing. The soil system needs to continue to recycle. We are in this place which I call the recycling place. Yeah? Everything has to constantly recycle, I think one of the speakers talked about cycles. That's Shakti. Because the other thinking is what Bacon articulated. He wrote a book called The Birth of Masculine Time. And The Birth of Masculine Time said the earth is dead. We have to make her our slave. We've got to exploit her. We've got to torture her. And then everything had to be done with external inputs, external energy. Nothing had its own power to act. But auto-organization, autopoiesis, is the power to act and be creative. So we've got to reclaim creativity. And Shakti and Prakriti are just 2 ways of talking about it. But creativity is the key, and destruction is not creativity. Putting a gene, toxic gene into a plant and then claiming intellectual property is actually an act of violence and contamination. It is not creativity. So we need to distinguish between destruction and creativity. We need to distinguish between degeneration and regeneration.
You were just talking about seeds, and I would like to talk you to talk a little bit more about that. And in your memoirs, in the chapter Looking Back, Looking Forward, you recount the birth of Vandana in 1991. And what was your first aim or goal with this seed, the use of seed and the seed as symbol of all the struggles you wanted to address?
You know, the reason I started to save seeds was because I know seed is a source of life. And seed is self-organized creativity. Can you imagine from a tiny seed, an acorn gives you an oak tree. A little wheat seed gives you your bread. That is ultimate creativity. And here were the companies, the chemical companies. I call them the poison cartel. 2 reasons. One, they make poisons. They function like a cartel. They change their names too often. But they're still the 5. They said, we're going to own the seed through genetic engineering and GMOs. And I said, oh, for them, GMO means God move over. We will now claim to be the creators. And they're wanting to make seed saving illegal for farmers and establish monopolies and destroy the seeds of the world in diversity and replace with them GMOs. For me, was an ecological violence, and an ethical violence, and a social justice violence. I didn't know anything much. I didn't know about seeds. I didn't know how to save them, and I learned. One thing I've learned in life is you have enough passion, you will learn what you need to learn for that passion. So I learned, and Navdanya as an organization was born in 91, but I started saving seeds from 87 when I attended a meeting where the corporations laid out this plan. When you say, what was your aim? My aim was defending life on earth in freedom and diversity and integrity. That's it, simple.
Thank you. And maybe on that extent, the EU has just decided to renew the use of glyphosate for 10 more years. What does it inspire you?
Well, you know, my friends in the European Parliament have just informed me they've managed to pass the law on ecocide, crimes against nature. And the EU renewing the use of glyphosate for 10 years at a time when we know what glyphosate is. We have enough scientific understanding. We have enough court cases that are proving that it is giving cancer, and Bayer has lost more money because of these cases than what it paid for Monsanto. So in fact, Monsanto's value is 0 right now. And in spite of all of this, actually Bayer could go bankrupt because of the glyphosate issue. And yet here is European Union, which pretends to be making a whole new Green Deal and farm to fork, approving a chemical that should never have existed. 3 reasons. Its purpose is to kill everything green. Everything green is what makes this planet. It gives us our climate. It gives us our food. It protects the soil. It is the biodiversity of plants. And to say we're going to kill this is ecocide. And the second is now we have the scientific evidence. And I do think it is very important for Europeans to now design new creative actions, new Shakti, to be able to say that the European Union is becoming an extension of Bayer. It's no more representing anything about Europe. It's representing a toxic company. And maybe you can play a role in some of this, but we did You know, in 2015, we announced we would put Monsanto on trial, and we did a Monsanto tribunal in The Hague. That was before it was bought out by Bayer. I said it yesterday that we need now a public trial of not just Bayer, but the European Union officials who are imposing this decision. And this is the reason I wrote Earth Democracy. I said, how can a handful of corporations rule the world? How can a handful of corporations hijack our governments? How can a handful of corporations make decisions to destroy the earth, our health, our safety, our freedom? It has gone too far. We must find ways to stop it. The glyphosate decision is a trigger for Europe to organize in very creative, very powerful ways.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks. I will have one more question before giving the voice to the audience. And my last question is about water. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about water in the end, because we had some little talks the last days, and water was often there. So I wanted you maybe to try to explain us for you what is the place of water in Earth democracy. What about water?
First, that water is the flow that connects us. And defending the freedom of water is a big element of Earth democracy. But water is not separate from other flows. It's the forests, their leaves that make humus, and then creates water. So water and plants and soils, or even the climate issue, and we've talked about the fact that the climate crisis is about water. It's time to go, you know, if you're sick, temperature is one thing you measure of an infection. But for a little baby who's getting dehydrated, you look at the dehydration because a child could die of dehydration. The highest cause of baby deaths is dehydration. So water is the very flow of life, and in fact gives us a very ecological, physical understanding of flow. The river flows. And, you know, we're living through these strange times where we assume that people who come from the Arab world and, you know, don't really have an understanding of anything. But the word for water in Arabic is ab. And the word for human settlements is abadi. Because all settlements came around water. We need water, so we organize around water. We create civilizations around water. Look at all your cities. You know? All Indian cities around water. And the water then connects us as people. And the violation of water becomes the violation of the earth, but it is also the violation of human rights. And, you know, we were in Lyon yesterday. You know, they've reclaimed water as a public good. But everything in our democracy is recognizing the flows, recognizing not just that we need to move to subsistence, which was described so beautifully, but every part of the earth has a right to its ecological space. Yeah? The river has its ecological space. The atmosphere has its ecological space. The forest has its ecological space. The bees and butterfly have their right to ecological space. And the soil organisms have their right to their ecological space. And the integrity and interconnection of those ecological spaces, it's made through flows. Food and nutrition and water. And that's the reason we really have to defend the integrity of water and the integrity of food. Because this is the integrity of life.
Thank you very much.
A few words in French, sorry. Donc, on va faire tourner un micro avec Simon, je crois, qui est à la baguette sur le sujet. Si vous souhaitez poser une question, levez bien haut le bras.
Donc on a un bon moment pour les questions du public, mais si jamais vous êtes à court d'idées, nous on a encore des bonnes questions à poser à Vandana. La règle que je voudrais bien qu'on se donne tous et toutes collectivement, si vous en êtes d'accord, c'est d'essayer de poser les meilleures questions possibles. Qu'on ait des questions qui nous fassent vraiment tous et toutes réfléchir et qui soient des questions qui soient vraiment intéressantes à répondre pour Vandana. C'est une petite règle que je permets qu'on se mette ensemble par respect pour elle et la hauteur de ses vues. Merci beaucoup.
Et si je peux me permettre d'ajouter une règle, nouvelle règle, à la REcyclerie, on essaye de faire de la parité, y compris dans les questions. Donc de toute façon, après un garçon, on ne donnera pas à nouveau la parole à un garçon, et après une fille, on ne donnera pas à nouveau la parole à une fille. Donc l'idée, c'est qu'on alterne, si c'est OK pour vous. Merci beaucoup. Je laisse la première personne la plus courageuse lever la main. Elle est ici.
C'est un challenge d'être la première, en plus avec l'objectif là. Hello.
Du coup, vous pouvez poser les questions en français et je lui traduis si c'est plus simple pour vous. N'hésitez pas, hein. As you wish.
I'm really glad to see you again. So my question is, I feel I'm involved already in Earth democracy. I'm in a CSA. I'm growing food. I'm doing a lot. But my question is, how can I get with me people who are drinking Coke at my work, for example, without seeing that it's water inside it? Like people eating meat every day. Like I really don't know how to get them involved. So I feel like I'm a bit, on them every time, saying things, but I don't feel a connection. I don't feel them, understanding the things I understand. So how can we get on board the people, that are far away from all these talks? Thank you.
Condemning never changes anyone. It makes them even more defensive and cling even more to whatever they're doing, the harm to the earth, harm to themselves. I think the point is we are being put into such different worlds. You talked about how there are different worlds that don't even talk to each other on the mining question. So you can't even just say, leave them be, Share stories. Let them make up their mind, but bring them the information, I think for too long, environmental activists behave like missionaries. Missionaries have never, they've converted, but they've never changed your mind. So share the stories, give them a gift. This has a chapter on Coca-Cola. They'll realize then that, I'm drinking stolen water. There's so much literature now on the fact that not only is it stolen, you're harming others, worse, you're harming yourself, because especially if it's those drinks. New research is showing this silly thing called Coke Zero, which is supposed to be healthy, is even more damaging to your health because our body doesn't tolerate anything artificial. Nothing. Because we're part of the flow of life. I'll just say one more sentence, I'm so happy on this trip. I've always managed to get a fresh orange juice. And the way we dealt with Coca-Cola in India is, besides supporting the struggles, fighting against Coke physically on the ground, is we remembered all our cold drinks that we used to make, the different flowers, the different fruits. Through that, we made those popular to the extent the airlines now serve them. So celebrate the diversity that is an alternative. And that's the way to de-addict the people who are addicted to Coke.
Bonsoir, merci d'être là. Alors moi, je vais poser ma question en français. C'est pour mettre en place ce changement de récit, ce changement de pensée, de voir les choses. Moi, j'ai peut-être pas les bons termes et les bons concepts pour... C'est combien de morts? Parce qu'on va s'apercevoir d'une chose, du moins, on l'a déjà testé, et vous aussi. C'est combien de morts le système, pour se défendre, va produire? Parce que forcément, à un moment, il y aura des oppositions. C'est ce qui est dénoncé chez nous quand on dit dès qu'on s'attaque à quelque chose, c'est violent. Et cette violence est souvent qualifiée maintenant de terrorisme. Et donc, à chaque fois, on voit qu'il y a une disqualification qui est produite et qui va pouvoir justifier les violences et même les morts que, forcément, à un moment, ça générera. Et c'est ça qui est aussi assez effrayant dans ces changements, c'est combien de morts va y avoir pour pouvoir obtenir un début de changement. Moi, c'est comme ça un peu que je vous pose la question.
Even if you were to not act to defend the earth, her rivers, her forests, her land, and you stayed inactive, there is no guarantee that you will be protected. After all, the billionaires have already said, and I've written my book, Oneness, that you published, was written when I was in the city in 2015. And most people didn't notice that Bill Gates just took over the climate summit. I remember being in this room for one of the side events of the NGOs and the movements. And Zuckerbergs and the others have already said, and there's an advisor of the World Economic Forum called Noble Harari. They all talk very openly that we don't need 99% of humanity. So they've decided they don't need more species, they don't need most of humanity, but they want all of the Earth's resources to continue their extractive economy and their monopolizing economy. So I don't think we should think of what will they do to us. I think the question we should ask ourselves is, how do we organize and live in ways that we have a future collectively? And one of you talked about bon vivant. Bon vivant came out of indigenous communities of the good life. Now, no indigenous community destroys the earth to live. In fact, 80% of the biodiversity is in the 20% land left with indigenous people. So we have to start realizing that our good life is in our hands to shape in partnership with the earth, in co-creation with the earth. And we should move that in our communities and our minds. And we have to do it with a combination of auto-organization, self-rule, what Gandhi calls self-rule, what nature is, self-organization, and resistance of a very, very creative kind. And what I've learned, when I saved seed, I said, they want a monopoly on seed. If I save even one seed, I've broken their monopoly. Even one seed. So, do the right thing for the earth and your communities. Out of there, it's a contest of dispensability. The 1% wants us as disposable. They don't care. They made the indigenous people disposable, committed genocide. The poor disposable, everyone's a disposable category. We have to basically say, for the sake of the earth and our present and our future, we will make them redundant to our lives. That's it.
Bonjour. Qu'est-ce qui vous donne le plus d'espoir aujourd'hui, compte tenu du contexte international?
My biggest source of hope is working with the earth. I mentioned how Chipko made me humble with respect to local communities and their knowledge. But all my life's work has made me extremely humble in the context of the power of nature. We've saved seeds, but we've regenerated soil. We weren't designing it. The bees and butterflies have come back. We weren't planning it. The mycorrhizae in our soil is 3,600% more. 3,600% more. We didn't put it there. So, cultivating hope as your right action allows you to do the right thing. And when you do the right thing, the earth does big things. And that's where I get hope.
Hi. Thank you for being here, Vandana. I have a little question about rights of nature and how you perceive that in India. I know some people like Ashish Kotari or other people are not against, but a bit reticent about the concept of rights, and how I wanted to see how you relate this to other concepts like bioregionalism or indigenous conserved communities areas that you might have more implemented in India or South Asia. What is your opinion, or how do you relate these different concepts together?
You know, for me, they are not different concepts. Different people articulate the same thing in different ways. But it doesn't make them different concepts that have to be pieced together. You know, Maria and I, you know, when we wrote ecofeminism together, you know, she had a wonderful word for ecofeminism, you know, that it's not about taking environment and women and mixing them in a pot, yeah? But understanding what are the underlying structures, processes that connect the violence against nature and the violence against women. You talked about bioregionalism, you talked about the issues. Living systems work with the immediate. You know, the mycorrhizal fungi connects to the plant. And both of them work together to create richer soils, more food, and the miracle. You know, our new work is showing, and some of us who are working together, we can, that 1.5 degree panic that is being created on the climate can be reached by 10% farmers going organic in 10 years. We can keep it within, because of the way plants and soil have the power to recycle carbon. And bioregionalism, and in Italy, biodistricts, or localization, any of these different words are basically saying that the globalized system that the corporations put in place is first and foremost a market. It's not an earth system. It's the flow of commodities and profits. It's not about people's basic needs. Worse, it takes the resources that would meet the basic needs of people, their water, their food, and puts it to the service of the commodities. I mean, why is the Amazon being invaded? By agribusiness and BlackRock. It's not the people of the Amazon. They protected that land and created gardens for 10,000 years or more. So every part of living systems works in close association. And that means locally. And localization has to be the place where we regenerate the world, place by place, as was discussed in the earlier session. Regenerate your particular place. And then the other places be getting and then it becomes what Gandhi described, as he described it so beautifully. So I don't want to see the world as a pyramid where the top, which extracts from the bottom, crushes the bottom that supports it. I see the world as an ever-expanding, never-ascending oceanic circle, where every person, every being is at the center of each circle. And the largest circles embrace everyone within without trying to dominate. That's what localism and bioregionalism is. Begin with the local, and it will spread. Because we have another very bad way. I think 3 diseases we have. The monoculture of the mind, about which I've written. The idea of a static and dead nature. And because of that, the separation, that if something's local, it's stuck. And they always say to me, you know, all of these policymakers come to me, it's okay, your work in Navdanya is very good, but how will you scale it up? I said, we don't want to scale it up. We are scaling it out horizontally. Valley to valley, community to community. We have to start thinking horizontally and give up the vertical addiction.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. It's such a great honor to see you, to listen to you. You've been an inspiration since I was a student. In your struggles about what's going on in India, it's always been very interesting to read about the struggles. I had 2 questions for you. I think one of them you just seen it. It was to ask you to talk a little bit more about ecofeminism, because this is something we don't talk much about in France. And the second one is, can we now eat basmati rice without a patent? Or is there still a patent on basmati rice?
Ecofeminism is a convenient way of basically saying that the violence against the earth and violence against women is not two violences. It's the same violence against indigenous people, same violence against farmers of the world, because there's now the billionaires are talking about farming without farmers and food without farms. They're talking about patented food, lab-made food. And that's where they want us to take us. And our resistance has to be like on seed. We said we will not let it be a monopoly of Monsanto. We now have to say, we are food. We will not be colonized through our food system, and every false narrative that is created around food, we must question it ourselves and create the alternative systems at whatever scale you can. Whatever scale you can. And ecofeminism allows structures to evolve that are basically structures that limit capitalist patriarchy, the power of the rule of the fiction of money. And all of this is what has evolved to give us the structure that is, the corporation, East India Company, is a patriarchal structure. Whereas the economy is the earth family and communities and mothers. If we had put mothers at the unit of a family, we'd have had a very different economic system. It would be based on caring and sharing and giving. So earth democracy and ecofeminism actually are just, different windows for looking at the same place. And it's not the case that it isn't. I mean, we just had a wonderful evening with amazing young women talking about ecofeminism and earth democracy. So it's very vibrant. On Basmati, when I fought the Basmati patent, we eventually, this is an interesting story, because an American company called Rice Tech, they just put tech against anything and said, my invention. So they stole our Basmati and put Rice Tech. We said, no, this is our Basmati. So we did a big campaign in India. I had to give a talk in the university in Austin in Texas. So I said, I want to go to where this Rice Tech is. And they found it for me, and we did a protest. And old women came with me to protest, hands off our Basmati. But then, this was before the click a mouse. You remember? Now you just click a mouse and you join a petition. Those days, it wasn't there. So the women, wrote postcards. Beautiful. So the US Patent and Trademark Office is what gives the patents. It's called USPTO. And these postcards, hundreds of thousands were sent, said, if you don't give up the Basmati patent, we will have to rename you the US Piracy and Theft Office. So the office, eventually they had to give it up, except the name, not the name, sorry, the particular variety, that they bred. And the Basmati that the Navdanya farmers grow is not patented. Except for Rice Tech, none of the Basmati in the world is patented. Only the reason we fought these biopiracy patents is to defend our commons, our heritage, our livelihoods. You can get Indian and Pakistani Basmati.
Merci. Je vais vous poser ma question en français. Comment vous définiriez-vous les nouveaux OGM Et qu'est-ce que vous pensez du projet de réglementation de la Commission européenne sur les nouveaux OGM? Et quels sont les risques pour l'Europe?
The old GMOs. There's nothing new. We've done a very good report from Navdanya International. If you go to the website of Navdanya International, you will find a report called Nothing New About New GMOs. The reason there's nothing new is first and foremost, the same paradigm of genetic reductionism and genetic determinism is being used. But life is not a Lego set. Life is a complex, self-organized system. And you change one gene, you change 1,500 other genes and have a huge impact. Second, the big myth is it's not adding anything new, unlike the transgenics where you added. But the problem is that that program of CRISPR-Cas9 has to be added to an organism. And you do it by the same vectors, in this case, the agrobacterium, which is a plant cancer, to infect the organism into which you want to attend. This has the risk then of carrying bacterial infections, viral infections, and this is being found. There are enough evidences. They wanted to make animals without horns through gene editing, and the animals were full of bacterial infection because there is external genes used for the modification. But the third most important thing is, the reason these are old GMOs, because like I said, I said GMO for industry means God move over. We are the creators. We will collect the royalties. It was about patents. This is also about patents. Already, 100 patents are in the hands of the poison cartel. The Bayers, the BASFs, the Cortevas. So it is still genetic reductionism, external gene introduction, foreign genes are present, and it's about patent. So all our work on resisting GMOs must continue because these are still GMOs.
Hello, dear Vandana. I'm very, very happy to see you in Paris after Déroulement in February. My question was just about, you have created Diverse Women for Diversity, an international women network, and I wanted to know if you agree to talk a little bit about that network to us, and maybe about the Manifesto for Peace, the Peace Manifesto.
I've constantly been observing how the capitalist patriarchal system based on extraction and greed cannot see diversity. It sees monocultures and imposes monocultures. And the GMO question is about even bigger monocultures and monopolies in the hands of 5 giants. So there were 2 processes by which this was happening. One was in the WTO, the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights Agreement, but we were countering it. And we were countering it through the Convention on Biological Diversity. And basically saying GMOs will have an impact on biodiversity and governments owe it to the earth and to people to assess these impacts. So we managed, and I particularly worked at this clause on 19.3, which led to biosafety. When we started, I remember the first meeting I did was at the European Parliament on the GMOs and the impacts. And they were amazing scientists, ecologists. And bit by bit, the men stopped attending, because they were heads of department, they were deans, and pressure would be put on them by industry. The president of the university would say, stop this man from going, otherwise we will stop your grants. So pressure was put because the men were important, men were central, and we were a handful of women always on the margins, And we're sitting at a table like this one day, and we realized the only people defending biodiversity was a handful of women, they called it the thin line, and we were all diverse, and we just, on a little serviette, on a little paper napkin, we wrote our manifesto on diverse women for diversity. and continue to resist the WTO trade rules and strengthen the biodiversity laws. You know, Bangari Mathai was part of it. Many names. Many of them are no more. The two who are really old now is Christine von Weizsäcker and Beth Burrows. But every few years, we just have a gathering. We just celebrate. And this March, we had a celebration at Navdanya, the Navdanya farm, where we have an Earth University, where we offer courses, and those of you who want to explore more how you can regain your freedom by working more closely with the Earth and her living processes. We do a course from 15th September to 15th October. We call it Return to Earth. So in March, we had this amazing gathering, and we wrote a manifesto together, and you know, all our women farmers were part of it. So there were women from around the world, but women farmers from around India, which is also so diverse. And we wrote a manifesto called Making Peace with the Earth. And again, the same website that has the Nothing New About New GMOs has the Making Peace with the Earth manifesto. And next every March before Women's Day, I do a short conversation like we are having here on ecofeminism. And that's from 4th of March to 6th of March. And for communication, you can write to either Thomas or Wild, or write to Earth University at @navdanya.net.
Hi, thank you for coming today. I was wondering, what has writing this book taught you, and what lies ahead for you? What is your next adventure, I guess?
Well, for me, writing this book was about remembering and bringing together all the struggles I've been part of, all the people I have worked with in those struggles, because some of them are old. You know, to remember Chipko, and to remember our forest movement, and to remember our fight against WTO in Seattle. It's not just a remembering for me, but I think it's a collective remembering, because these important things that shaped our times are not communicated enough. How many of you know about Bhopal? You know, how many of you know about Seattle and the fact that we shut down the biggest organization at that time? They were saying there will be no national constitution anymore. The constitution will be the World Trade Organization written by the corporations. That's why we created IFG. We won't be ruled by corporations. We never elected them. We will govern ourselves. You know, every bit of my life is responding to an unpredictable turn. Chipko was the unpredictable turn of seeing Himalayan forests disappear. Agriculture was the unpredictable turn of violence erupting in Punjab, the tragedy of Bhopal. No one could have predicted it. The unpredictable turn of different dimensions to which I was responding from the same ground. My ground hasn't shifted. My mind has stayed, you know, in the same place as part of nature, as biodiversity of the mind, as interconnected. So I look into the future, not with any certainty about what the future holds. In fact, thank goodness for uncertainty. Can you imagine if there was certainty and we were condemned to the rule of the 1% forever? No, we have the possibilities to change that by organizing in a different way and changing the narrative and creating our own visions. But what particular future it will be, I know this much I will continue to do. I will defend the last species through my work. In my communities, I will defend the vulnerable. I will stand for justice. And I will always tell the bullies and the liars of the world, and they are bullies and liars, stop bullying and stop lying.
Hello. Okay. First of all, thanks a lot for coming here and doing this conference. It was very interesting, even though I arrived a bit late. But so I have actually two questions. One is, what do you think about global action? What you're doing is a global action as well, because you're inspiring people worldwide, and as more especially, for example, what about laws? For example, the European Union is trying to make green policies. There is the UN who is trying to do something, and then there's the Kyoto Protocol and stuff like that. Do you think they are effective? Should we work to make more of these policies, global, regional, and national policies? And yes, this is my first question. And second question is, what do you think about green traveling? And sometimes global action needs to makes us we have to move far away, so we take the airplane, and then I feel bad, for example, because there's emissions. So what do you think about this, and can we compensate in certain terms these emissions that we cause with our action for the environment? What do you think about this? Thanks a lot.
You know, in the earlier panel, it was reiterated that law is important. And for the areas that really matter to life, the law was common law. It was the law of the commons that defined how communities act. And they shaped the community governance, and they governed over themselves with that. Because, you know, I don't know how many of you have read this nonsensical article called Tragedy of the Commons, where this man thinks that if there's a commons, everyone's just taking from it and it'll get destroyed. No, a commons is governed with responsibility and equality. And the rights flow from participation in care for the commons. And those rights are equal. You know, Eleanor Ostrom actually got a Nobel for articulating this whole sphere of the economy. And we will need to, and that's Earth democracy, we will need to recognize our commons. In IFG, we wrote a very, very powerful book on alternatives, and a very big section of it is on the new commons. The old commons was the forest, was the pasture. The new commons is our health, our education, our social security, our institutions, our democracy. And we have to not just define them, but we have to recognize, write the rules for it, which is the regulation and law. And it's only with colonialism that law started to come from the top down. Otherwise, they always grew from community, and community merged with community, and that's how the larger systems evolved. We'll have to do that again. Because right now, the higher systems, beginning with the European Union, are captured. They're captured by corporate power. The glyphosate example and the gene editing approval are two clear examples. Scientifically known, both wrong. But when I said, you know, to be powerful and to get away with lies is why we need new creative ways to write other systems of self-governance, other laws of self-governance. And I'll give you an example of how we did this. You know, around the time the basmati was being patented and the neem had been patented and the WTO was writing the getting the TRIPS agreement, I would go to the villages and describe what is happening internationally. And it was on the 5th of June, which is World Environment Day, 1999, 200 villages got together. It's a bit like your Rhone Valley Assembly. From each village, a few people came. And in the village, they had discussed what are their principles of governance. Then they came together and wrote. That's where the Living Democracy movement grew. They wrote, they said, we are part of one earth family. These forests, these rivers, they're living. And then they added, and they said, we will not allow any law that separates us from our family members and tries to privatize and patent what is common. We will not accept the non-cooperation. And then they wrote postcards to the WTO, told the Secretary General, you don't have the jurisdiction over our forest. We have the jurisdiction, and we are telling you, don't overreach. They wrote to REcyclerie. It's what's your desperation? We have thieves in our village. And if they steal bread and we understand they're hungry, we give them bread. If a young person stole money to get medicine for the parent, we give them money. Tell us what's your desperation. We will give you what you need, but you don't have to steal. Come under the banyan tree and sit with us. So that action is what created the living democracy movement, because it was said representative democracy is a totally dead democracy right now. So we have to start shaping in the contemporary context of the crisis of the earth, the crisis of society, and the separations and divisions in society. When you talk about, take the UN. So I was part of writing all these treaties, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, but I'm also watching how they're becoming new instruments of colonization. In the last negotiations, third world countries called the carbon offsets and carbon sinks issue as a new carbon colonization of our world and new potential for land grab and resource grab for our world. So we have to watch it all and be active and engaged. And example after example shows that people find creative ways to organize, to self-govern, and write. The beautiful thing is we have the possibility to remind ourselves of being part of the earth and write laws according to that and create the local actions. Your second question was what?
What about green traveling?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, you talked about global action. Traveling is not the global action. Sitting together like this is the global action. But I've been enough in international mobilizations, but I couldn't have done what I did there if I wasn't involved in what I did at the grassroots. Every struggle of mine has been informed by the reality of particular ecosystems and particular communities. Now, I don't have a guilt trip about the fact that I've traveled here for our wonderful publishers, both scientifically as well as the fact that this is necessary. And I'll give you an example. I'm writing a new book on climate change and the future of food. And I've just added a much more detailed section on fertilizers. You know what the full life cycle emissions of chemical fertilizers, which emits a greenhouse gas 300 times more damaging to the planet than carbon dioxide? It is more. Fertilizer is more than all the commercial flying in the world. So if we get rid of fertilizers in agriculture and shift to organic, we've already made a difference. We made a huge difference. So we need to be proportionate. We can't afford to only look at one element, And we can't afford to look at the element where the powerful want us to look and not see our potential, what we can do, or the other harm they're doing through greenwashing. There's a lot of greenwashing going on right now. Yeah? And when I said there's a second reason why Gandhi was asked, Gandhi was hugely against industrialism. And he was asked, and he's, but you travel by train. And he said, I do. And I don't want an India that's dependent on trains that were created for colonial extraction. But I travel so that I can strengthen the Indian movement to fight the British Empire. So I travel to fight the empire of the 1%.
Si vous en êtes d'accord, on va prendre une dernière question et on va s'arrêter sur ces belles paroles. Merci.
Faut qu'elle soit bonne.
I try to be good. One of the key questions, as you just said it, is how to take good decisions, good collective decisions for humanity and for living beings and the planet in general. Elected assemblies have proved to be quite favorable to the richest all over the world. So we can wonder if we could not replace these elected assemblies by assemblies drawn by lot. That is tiré au sort in French. And this at all levels, because I think we need, for instance, a global assembly at the worldly level to take some decisions that we cannot take intergovernmentally. Do you think the same or not?
You know, I think democracy and freedom is too vital to be delegated even by lot. Participation, you know, when Earth democracy in everyday life includes democratic participation in your everyday life, making decisions about the water issue, making decisions about the food you eat. And yes, you can have a little bit of delegated elements. But when we wrote the law for the tribals in India, when the corporations were writing the WTO rules and being imposed on the world, we managed in India to say, the indigenous people were forgotten, they were left out. And they've always governed themselves. So we wrote a law, very powerful law, in the national parliament, that tribals have always governed themselves, and they have a right to self-governance, not through representation, but the whole community participating. And this is exactly the way in the North Americans, indigenous people, they participate through participation till you reach a consensus. If you just sit 20 nights, you would sit 20 nights. So participation is what direct democracy requires. And then, like I said, some element that comes after the participation can be delegated. And as I've written in Earth Democracy, anything living grows from the ground up. Everything killing comes from the top down. Bombs are dropped from the top. Plants grow from the grass. Yeah? So there's no shortcut. The corporations have found a shortcut by hijacking centralized authority. And that's the reason. One, we have an absolute duty and obligation and right to participate in our freedom and democracy. But we also have an obligation to limit the powers of those who don't represent us and our interests, or the interests of the earth. And therefore, the creative power of resistance is, how would I call it, is the non-local reverberation at the international level. The whole issue of non-locality in quantum theory is light years away. Things are connected. You don't always have to actually sit at a table. I find this phrase very annoying because we don't eat. Very often we sit on the floor and eat. So the idea that tables are the ultimate place to get together assumes a particular society. But what we have to think about is our oneness with the earth, that we are the water, we are the air, we are the soil. And the soil is feeding us, the mycorrhiza is feeding us. And with that consciousness, while acting locally everywhere, creating these ever-expanding circles, but most importantly, creating new narratives through every medium we can, through music, through books, through celebrations, through thought, and let that resonance reverberate. Because what is the real power of the universe is vibration. Unleash the right vibrations. We are living beings. We are part of an amazing resonating universe. The narrative we have to change is not through the mediums that the dominant used. The dominant created private property, the dominant created division, the dominant created separation, the dominant created extraction. And they used force, not resonance. Self-organization comes through resonance. The like thinking, the like feeling among everyone in a community. We are living through horrible times, but we are also living through an amazing moment of participating in the future evolution of our species and making it possible, making our future possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Vandana. Wonderful.
Merci pour votre écoute. Toutes nos émissions sont disponibles en podcast sur larecyclerie.com. Vous pouvez également suivre nos actualités sur Facebook, Instagram ou, encore mieux, venir échanger avec nous à la REcyclerie, au 83 boulevard Ornano à Paris, métro Porte de Clignancourt.